Good to see you. How are you all today? Fantastic. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this great day, great opportunity to sit around the table with friends, family, and to celebrate Kiwanis, celebrate the great things that we do in the community. We thank
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Connie. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, it's $1 because you guys can win four tickets to 5 different Balboa Park institutions by entering each of the next 5 weeks on our MTS Facebook. So all you have to do is guess where radio personality Hayes is standing or sitting at, and then you get
Hired to be
entered
the
to win.
well, this may be a sad dollar for some people. I got hired to be the keynote speaker for the Interclub Luncheon at District Convention, so I'll be at Kiwanis doing that. And then, while I sad to see a nice guy like Bud Black go, super excited that ASU former coach Pat Murphy, so go Devils, go Padres, is the
We got a small contribution to make to the foundation. We missed my birthday last week. It was the 13th. It's usually on this week, but it was on the calendar. I'm sure I wasn't there, but I wanted to make sure I caught up with the foundation on that. And one thing that I remember about my birthday, it's usually this week here at the zoo, but I shared a birthday with the late Stephen All. And I always remember him on this day, so thank you very much.
I'm gonna give him $10 to tell you I'm still here.
My birthday was last week, actually, and we usually celebrate at this meeting, Ryan and I together. So anyway, my happy dollar is that, for the last 8 or 9 months, I've been driving back and forth to Los Angeles to rehearse for this huge musical that the Salvation Army is putting on in London beginning next week. We'll be performing at the O2 Arena for 7 performances beginning on the 1st of July. But it's been a great experience. We just finally did our first real show in Pasadena this past weekend at the Salvation Army graduation service for the whole weekend, and I just want to say, as we celebrate the 150 years this year of the Salvation Army, I've been working along with Karina and some others in the community to really put together a big event to celebrate that, and we're looking to do that in November of this year. So I want you to put that in your calendar, November 20th. We're looking to do our kettle kickoff at Fashion Valley Mall, as well as a huge fundraiser event and celebration, and we're looking to raise $150,000. So I want to encourage you also to put your pennies away for that opportunity. So Salvation Army celebrating 150 years. That's awesome, and that's something that we all should celebrate. I think we've been you all have been a big part of the success of the Salvation Army here in this community, and we also want to recognize you during that time. So,
I have a happy dollar. My grandson is going to graduate from the University of Alabama on August 1st.
Wow.
And the really good news is that he has a job with Price Waterhouse.
My dad turned 80 this past April, and I threw him a big surprise party, and I know a couple of you guys were able to make it, and I threw him a big surprise party, and I'm just happy that he's here, and I live here in San Diego now. I was back in Virginia for a long time, and I'm grateful that I have all these wonderful
We are so glad to
moments
have
with
you
him.
with us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Danny.
So I have a very longtime friend named Natalie who has a 9-year-old daughter, and about a month ago it was discovered that she had a coiled spinal cord. And so, well, I think it was 2 weeks ago yesterday, she underwent surgery at Rady's Children's Hospital. And Natalie and her family, she has 3 other kids, they all stayed at the Ronald McDonald House for a week.
Wow.
So I finally had the opportunity to go over there and actually see the Ronald McDonald House and see how amazing it is. And I was really proud to know that the club has contributed so much to the Ronald McDonald House, especially seeing it from the inside, and especially seeing how it actually benefited some people that I know. So
I'm going to put
thank you
in
for
a
that.
happy dollar that I see Bill. Plus, I just attended yesterday, actually it ended, my 45th high school reunion, and 95% of our class is still alive, so I was thank God. And probably because they got out of Burbank. That's probably the main reason.
We want to do the amendments for the minutes from the last meeting last year. Okay, just trying to get things done correctly and in order. The first thing we need to do is we need to approve the minutes of the last general meeting, which occurred last year.
Approval. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? We've had a lot of discussion previously. No discussion. So all in favor of the motion which has been made and seconded, that we approve the minutes from the last meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Let's do the amendments. Yeah. No, let's go ahead and do the amendments. These are the proposed amendments to our articles. And won't go into the long conversation and dialogue we had in regards to these modifications to our amendments, but these are incredibly important to us maintaining control and management of our foundation in the future. These have been proposed by the foundation. I think we still need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And we've already had a lot of conversation and discussion. So hearing the conversation and discussion and questions, all in favor of approving the amendments as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Announce the names of the nominees for Board of Trustees for the class of 2018. Actually, that's the new class that will be coming onto the board beginning of the next Kiwanis year, beginning in October. So for the class of 2018, the nominees are Jim Floros, Jay Jeffcoat, Carl Nettleton, Danny Williams, and some guy named Bauer. And we also have 2 vacancies that we need to fill. One in the class of 2017, we need to fill a vacancy created by Gene Auerbach, moving to a place where he thinks he's going to have to pay less taxes. So Miranda Bordson is the nominee to replace Gene in the class of 2017. And then while we are not going to actually vote on the foundation officers today, that will be done at the foundation board meeting on the 24th. The nominees, just so that you'll all know, for foundation officers will be, the president will be Doug Frost, first vice president Judy Leitner, second vice president Norma Trost. What a catch that was. And Drew will become the immediate past president. I know he's running a tough campaign for that one. Charlie Coleman, secretary, and our chief financial officer will be Don Sturek. So as Norma moves into the second vice president position, that will vacate her spot on the class of 2016 trustees, and Claire O'Leary is the nominee to fill Norma's slot when that happens. So those are the nominees. I'll turn it back to the president for the election.
Okay, you've heard the nominations for those particular classes and for those particular positions. I was just going to do that. Okay.
Second.
So, Mr. Coley, thank you.
Thank you, David. As you all know, we occasionally recognize members for their community service. This meeting, we're going to recognize somebody who's not a member for their community service. Emily, could you take over the leadership of our Oral Leaders new website, which is very modern, very, very good. We've changed the venue to San Diego State Aztec Center. We had our beginning training program with Ken Blanchard at the meeting this year, and hopefully that will continue because it was very well attended. So, Emily, it's with great pleasure and an honor to present you with this award on behalf of the Kiwanis Club of San Diego for your distinguished service to Laurels for Leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's really my pleasure to introduce Bill Toone here today. But before I do, I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks, and I was going to do a happy dollar today, but it didn't really fit when I think about not just what this club does, but I think the individual members of this club do on their own, day in and day out, week in and week out. From Jose to Joe with Boys to Men to Rady's Children's Hospital, and there's just so many projects that our members are individually involved with. It's really a pleasure to be associated with that. So congratulations to all of you. It makes me really proud. And he learned that those populations needed as much help as the animals he was there to save, and that those human populations really needed to be helped too, and that the conservation organizations that he knew really didn't include them in their planning. So to close that gap, Bill founded the ECOLIFE Conservation Foundation, an organization dedicated to a world in which humans and nature live harmoniously. And I've got to tell you, Bill is humble and he's wise, he's filled with humor and good sense, and I know we love hearing from him each and every year on the progress of ECOLIFE conservation, and hear about the great stories he's going to tell, which I have no idea what it's going to be today. I'm not sure that he does either just yet, but we'll find out in a minute. Please welcome my good friend Bill Toone.
About how ECOLIFE got started and my work in Madagascar, which was very much the catalyst for the work I'm doing now. Me as with my role in the California Condor Recovery Program. And I have to tell you, I was very fortunate as a child to grow up in a community with a zoo like the San Diego Zoo. And I went to work for this organization when I was 16 years old. And through that, I had lots of opportunity, but one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was get to be fascinated with the potential role of zoos in conservation, especially in terms of reproductive biology in birds. So I went up to UC Davis to study reproductive biology, and the only professor working on bird biology was a guy working on condors. So that's really how I got roped into the condor. I got to know the condor, though, only as a wild bird. There were no birds in zoos when I started. And all of my studies were aimed at determining how we could manage this bird in captivity. When the day came 4 years into my studies, and I literally lived in the hills, I was rarely home. I was with condors more than with people, watching every move they made every single day. I watched a condor pick up a thermal and without beating its wings drift up to over 4 miles of altitude. Birds at that point do what we birders call dotting out. And when a bird with a 9-foot wingspan dots out by going straight up, that's a long ways up. They would drop off of that thermal at maybe 70 miles an hour, glide for over 100 miles, and pick up another thermal. So at a very critical point in 1983, the determination was made that it would be myself and Noel Snyder, who would step into a condor nest for the first time legally in history and remove an egg and bring it to the zoo. And as I sat in that cave with the mother bird wheeling past the door, blocking out the sunlight with her wings as she went by, I got very emotional about it because I'd only known these as wild birds. And this egg that we picked up, if we brought it to the zoo and we were successful, it would have to produce a bird that would spend the rest of its life in a cage 40 feet wide, 80 feet long, and 24 feet tall. But finally in 1990, we released a bird back into the wild. I was there when it happened, and I had in my back pocket my resignation from the federal recovery team. And as soon as the bird walked out, it was a big disappointment to everyone there. The media was there. They were waiting for this amazing, majestic first flight of this condor. She walked out of the crate, walked to the edge of the rock, and laid down in the sun. And I smiled because I thought it was just great. Because regardless, for the first time in many years, a condor did exactly what it wanted. But in 1995, I got that call that would change everything, and it was to lead an expedition. I'd obviously earned my creds as a field biologist at that point, and I was asked to lead an expedition to a remote portion of Madagascar, the Mashwal Peninsula, which is up in the northeastern quadrant. And today is very poignant to get to talk about that, because as I tell the story, I just dropped off at the airport a very key player that I haven't seen in 15 years who came from Madagascar and visited. And at the end, if we have time, I'll tell you a little story about how she ended up here. But in any event, it was an exciting thing to be asked to do because Madagascar is a biological treasure chest. 6th largest island in the world, out in the Indian Ocean off the coast of East Africa. They get real unusual with horns on their heads, some of the larger, the parsons, chameleons the size of your arm. The Malagasy didn't like them much, but they were fascinating creatures, and I'll tell a little more about them. And of course, the real fascination for most people are the lemurs. And the lemurs exemplify again the remarkable nature of Madagascar. This is a family of very primitive primates, but an entire family with species and subspecies, different genera, but only found on this island. They're not found anywhere else in the world. There's nowhere else you will find any species of lemur. And they range from this really sweet mouse lemur, which was quite common where we were working in the Mashwal, onto some of the more classy lemurs, we'll call them. This is one of the reasons that they refer to Madagascar as Ghost Island. There's a couple of reasons. One is that the indigenous people almost all believe in ghosts. And you'll see pictures of their homes. They're all up off the ground a little bit. The other reason it's called Ghost Island is really these little guys. They have the most amazing gait. And in the evening, when they're going through the trees, it looks like they're floating. They spring off the branches give, and they give, and everything moves together. And you just see these white human-like forms drifting through the trees in silence. And of course, one of the strangest ones made famous by Gerald Durrell in his book, The I and I. This guy's really fascinating. They have ears, sharp-pointed teeth that point forward, a very strange finger that's skinnier than all of the others, and they wander along branches listening. And when they hear a bug inside, they use those pointy teeth to make a little hole, and then they take that skinny finger and stick it in the hole, grab the larva or beetle or whatever's in there, pull it out, and eat it. And that's how the eye gets its food. Wherever you go in the world, there is habitat change, habitat being converted into other uses. Here we call it just agriculture. That's the leading cause of habitat change in the world right now, or conversion. In the New World, when we see it being done in the rain, burn it off, hence the slash, and burn, and then they plant their crops there. Tropical soil is very thin, it's very poor, it runs off in the next rains, and they move to a new area and region. Getting around Madagascar is kind of challenging. Madagascar doesn't have what you would call tourist infrastructure. They have planes, and even when you charter them, sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. I left my wife, the first year I was in Madagascar, I was going to trek across the peninsula, 120 miles. Part of the story will be about that. Sonny came with me to get ready for the trip. And the deal was I was going to leave her in this little village of Marnsetra, start my trek. I'd be gone 5 or 6 weeks. They were going to come pick her up in a plane, take her back to the capital, she'd fly home. So 6 weeks later, I come out of the bush on the other end. The first words in English I hear are, "We're so sorry about your wife." Fortunately, I have a sweet and terribly patient wife. Nobody went and picked her up. There were no phones, she had no radio, she had no nothing. She spoke no Malagasy, nobody there spoke English. She just sat around until someone came. She was about 15 pounds lighter. She didn't know how to get food or anything, but she had a great time and made friends with a lot of kids. It was a little upsetting to her mom, who was the only reason Sonny got rescued, because her mom went to meet the international flight to pick up her daughter, and her daughter never came off. So she'd go day after day waiting for her daughter, and finally she called the embassy in Madagascar to find her. So the infrastructure is poor. The effects of Tavi are this. This all used to be rainforest. Madagascar has lost over 90% of its natural ground cover. This red color is called laterite clay, and this is, most forests around the world are on a bed of laterite clay. The trouble with that is once you denude it to this point and then have these torrential tropical downpours on it, it turns that into concrete. You will never restore any of this forest, and certainly not within lifetimes of our own. From the air, along the coastline after a storm, Madagascar looks just like a bleeding ulcer in the middle of the Indian Ocean, with the wealth of the country, its people, its wildlife washing into the ocean. So for a biologist, that was going to be an important place to work, and they wanted me to work there because the only information they could get from the air about where I was going to be was this, which was great. Yes, there's trees. So the trick, but this was and is the largest standing patch of untouched forest anywhere in Madagascar. So the idea was for me to do a bit of homework, determine the value of this forest, and hopefully they were going to set it aside as a national park. The trek started in Marancetra. This is where we left Sunny behind, so I want you to know, as awful as that story sounded, she sat on the beach all day. The only problem was there weren't pina coladas. So, but what the heck. They make a wonderful alcohol out of sugar cane called betsa betsa. You squeeze all the juice out of the sugar cane, spit in it, when it starts to bubble, you drink it. It'll give you a headache, that's for sure. Our trek started out from the coastline and directly into the center of the peninsula. These are all porters you see. The difficulty here is that I'm going to carry a satellite phone with me for emergencies. In 1995, that meant I would carry 35 pounds of telephone. So that's one porter. Then you need a porter to carry the food for that porter and me. Then you need another porter to carry my bags and my food. And pretty soon what you find out is that you really need about 1,000 porters, and it never ends, and you can just form a line and pass your stuff across the peninsula. At some point you just have to say no and make it happen. So there's the team heading off into the Maswa Nome. And whenever we rolled into town, there were squeals of "Salut Vaza," hello Vaza, hello white guy. They always told me it meant traveler, but I never saw them call anyone else a traveler unless they were white. So, but they were joyful, happy, lovely, comfortable people, as opposed to being in the capital city, where poverty was horrific and where people were unhappy, where you see a 50-year-old woman defecating in the street because she has nowhere else to go. And in these communities, there was purity and joy within their own culture and their own way. They were not poor, don't get me wrong, they were simple and loved it. As we got a little farther in, I became more and more of an oddball, and it became really fascinating to stop and see what Vaza was going to do today. This is Vaza going to bed, and everyone came to watch. We went prepared for leeches and all sorts of other problems that you anticipate in the rainforest, and of course they were all there. But the challenge is this, is that when you go prepared for all those things, you're wearing boots and long pants, you've got your leech-proof socks, you've got your mosquito veil over your head, you're all dressed, you're dry and you're nice, and you go 40 steps and you find a river. So you sit down, you take everything off, you get into your shorts, carry it across the river, sit down on the other side, put it all back on, go another 40 steps, and lo and behold, there's another river. And I could see the look in the porter's eyes, like we're gonna die before we get across this peninsula if Vaza keeps changing his clothes. So, in the end, Vaza abandoned all of his fancy gear and trekked across in sandals, shorts, and a t-shirt, and came out nothing worse for wear. I just throw this in. This guy, he was the head of my porters. There's a couple of stories here. He's the one who could make kids run without any trouble at all. He was always very calm, but whatever he was said carried a tremendous amount of weight. The other reason that I want to show you this picture is that I worked in Madagascar from 1995 to the year 2000. This was the only meal I ever ate in the field. It was a bowl of white rice. It would disappear very quickly because everyone else liked it as well. But that was it. That was our life, and it was what the people on the peninsula all ate. This little girl was helpful in supplementing her diet as well as ours. She would take this little net, weight it down in the stream, tumble rocks up above it. The little crustaceans and maggots and larvae of various damselflies, whatever, would get caught in her net. She'd take her dirty little clothes off, spread them on the bank, dump all these larvae and let them cook in the hot tropical sun for a day or so, and then sprinkle them over the top of white rice. And it was actually delicious. I knew I had another shot of a chameleon. Of course, the chameleons are favorite for a couple of things. The chameleon, when you see them hunting, remind you of nothing more than someone you might see come out of one of the local bars. Their eyes are constantly rolling around in different directions. Neither of them seem to be focusing on the same thing. And how a brain can compute that kind of information coming in, I don't know. But when they spot something they want to eat, you see one eye swing around and lock in on it. And then a second later, the other eye swings around and locks in on it. And you know you're about to see a show. And you could literally, this happens in a fraction of a second, but you knew the minute both eyes locked, that's when you should push the button, and he'd be grabbing his butterfly. We finally pushed out of the coastal communities and into pristine forest where there was no one there. We could drink out of the streams without worry of our health. We could bathe. The forest was like none I'd seen in any of my travels. The beauty of the Madagascar forest, of the Malagasy forest, is that they're very benign. No venomous snakes, no lions or tigers or bears. So it's a beautiful forest to spend time in unless you're a spider. The predators are small, but nonetheless very effective. The geckos of Madagascar, much like the chameleons, are diverse and incredibly beautiful. Many of them amazingly cryptic, and I think I have a shot to show you a little bit later on of that. As we pushed past where there were people, though, the trails were trails made by animals. And because the animals would go straight up and down hills without concern for it, they would wash out in the rains and form these long ditches. And because we didn't want to hack the forest as we went through, we would follow the animal trails. But because in places they would get so deep, we would have to straddle them to walk. And so I ask you to imagine a 6 or 7 hour day of hiking uphill like this. I had great inner thighs. No one ever wanted to see them, but I'm telling you, they were. This is another one of the little geckos. This is a leaf-tailed gecko. The leaf-tailed gecko's camouflage is so incredible that I could never find them. I never once found one on my own. I would always have to have my guides help me look, and they would go and they'd bang on a tree hard enough that his eyes would open. And when their eyes opened, you could spot them, because they could literally flatten themselves to where they appeared to be no more than the thickness of a paper runner. They were obviously thicker, but it was so gradual, they just blended in and looked exactly like a piece of the tree. And of course, I'm a bird guide, so I had to look for birds. Now, Madagascar is not as diverse in birds. There's not the number of bird species you'll find in Africa, but the ones you find there, you find nowhere else. So it was the only place I was going to add them to my list. That's a paradise flycatcher. And I mentioned the fact that they had a boa constrictor in Madagascar. So constrictors are a New World group of snakes. In the Old World, they have pythons, so that's kind of the match to the New World boas. But this is a boa, very much like any other South American boa, and evidence of the historical progress of the landmass of Madagascar. Now, this next slide is because we don't look like anything you've ever seen before. And we do stuff that just makes you nuts. Yeah, so who's going to listen to me when I tell them how to fix the world? That was a realization I came to. I got rid of the glasses, cut my hair, put on a suit, and here we are today to tell you long stories. We were much surprised to come across a ridgeline and find a community. Everybody had fled into the forest when we came around. They already had seen Baza coming. We didn't know they were there. But as a biologist, I couldn't have cared less. This was a human community. It was something you made note of in your books, and you pressed on. And so I did. And so it comes to the story of this little boy. 2 years later, I got a call from the Malagasy government, 1997. We have vetted your work and the peninsula, and it has now been set aside as the largest tropical national park in Madagascar. So it was a congratulatory call. But in that call they said, but we noted in your notes that there's a village of people there. What are we going to do with them? And having thought about the people in the cities and how difficult life was and the joy that we'd seen in the communities as we walked into the peninsula, my recommendation was that they leave them there. He said, we will leave them there if you'll go live there and explain to them what it's going to be like to live in the national park. Now that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. First of all, they've already been living there and already knew how to do it. We're doing just fine. Second, I'm not an anthropologist. Third, we already knew that they didn't think the bazaar was all that great. So my immediate reaction was, yes, I'd be happy to clean every day, all day. So the Ignobe River there had crocodiles in it, and so you want to be a little cautious about the daily bath. So we decided we would watch where the Malagasy bathed and we would follow suit. We weren't allowed to bathe with them, so we adapted our plan, and we would bathe when the cattle went in every afternoon. We'd go in with the cows. And we figured that maybe a croc would eat a cow first, was just all we could figure. In any event, things weren't going well, and I said, we have to go, Tina. We're all done here. Nobody's talking to us, nobody's working. I saw this little boy literally, as we're breaking down camp, hiding under the bushes watching us. He was the first child who hadn't fled. And I put my hand behind my back and went, Areke, Arua, Tele, Ekata, Dim, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did it over and over and over until I finally heard his little voice playing it back to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Arua, Tele, Ekata, Dim, on and on. And his name was Elian, and we became friends. After a couple of days, Elian started bringing other kids to my camp, and then they brought their moms. And before very long, I was able to go into the village and teach classes with the kids. And so through Elian, we broke the ice into this tiny little community. Behind them is a very typical house, one room, it's wooden poles. The sides are reeds that they've just taken a sliver of bamboo, stabbed it through all the reeds, and then stacked it up like a wall along the side. They're all up off the ground a little bit. This one you can barely see. You'll see another slide later. It has a cage over the door. The door's a sliding door, very sophisticated. But it has a little cage there. That means that family has a small child that they don't want them to fall out when the door's open. So you could always tell where there were little kids. Slowly, people started to pay attention to what I was doing, but often with a look of, you gotta be kidding. You know, don't tell me this stuff, Asa. The woman in the background is the chief's wife, Marianne, and we formed a women's group to start doing some classes and training. When I'm gone for a very extended period of time, though, the zoo used to be willing to send my wife to join me. And today's also a noteworthy day. They chose in 1997 to send her with an escort from the zoo because they didn't want her to travel alone. They picked a primate keeper named Dave who'd never been further than Arizona. So we're not sure how well that system worked out. Nonetheless, it was a life-changing experience for Dave. I'm sorry to say Dave passed away 2 nights ago, and he'll be very missed. But when I knew Sunny was coming, I didn't have a real clear calendar, and we know how the tourist infrastructure is. So I would hike out to the coast, which was about 23, 24 miles from where I was, hike out to the coast and camp and wait during the window of time that I thought she might come. Every day I'd wade out into the ocean and look and watch. Every night go to bed and wait, and finally she came. And so that was always a highlight in my time. She's a wonderful backpacker and traveler. She loves being in the bush as much as I do. And the path to Antanambao was not always an easy one. And these few pictures in here are thanks to Dave. Only in these last few weeks of his illness did I get a chance to see all the pictures he took on that one trip with us. And so I'm able to share some of them today. But we had some amazing walks and amazing times getting into this little community. Now I always have to throw this in, and I'm sorry we have children here today. Not really, I'm delighted that we do. But I was very concerned about bringing Sunny into the village. It had taken me so long to get, adopted by them, to be brought into the community. And I thought sure bringing my wife was going to set me back another month. She walked into the village. First thing everyone did is walk up and grab her breasts. And I thought, well, this is a greeting that I have missed out on. No one ever mentioned that. They were absolutely fascinated that someone my wife's age still had breasts that were on her chest, as opposed to all the other places they could go. And it led to a lot of fascinating conversations about things like birth control and babies and infinite husbands, unfortunately. Because of course the first thought when they knew Sunny hadn't had a child, everybody just looked at me with huge sad eyes. Not a challenge having Sunny join us. In fact, what happened was the most remarkable thing perhaps that's ever happened to me. Sunny and I, we lose track of time when we're doing this, we don't think too much about it, but our translator had not. We arrived back in Antanabao on the day that would at home be Thanksgiving. And they prepared a Thanksgiving meal for us. They rolled rice mats out the entire length of the village, piled rice down the whole way. They killed a cow. It's the first meat I'd ever had in Madagascar. They pulled out plates and glasses I had no idea they owned. Everybody dressed up. And the poorest, most underserved people on the planet gave Sunny and I a dinner of thanks for all the wonderful things we have in their community. Our classes grew, and our time there was fun and remarkable and filled with love. One of the ways you do work like this is by integrating yourself into the community. These people are fascinating. They grow 3 crops that they sell, and they are sold to runners. So it's not that no one knew this community was there, it's just no one ever went there except runners who would run in, and they would take 3 products from them: cloves, coffee, and vanilla. And the people in the village had no idea what any of those products were used for. They had no idea why they grew them or why someone would want them. But it's where their clothing came from. 70% of the world's supply of vanilla, a multi-billion-dollar a year industry, is fueled by giving people like these used clothing. That's where it comes from. Cloves drying in the tropical sun. We spend a lot of time on cloves. Vanilla, the fascinating thing about the vanilla is that for all this vanilla coming from Madagascar, it's the product of a new world orchid that's found in Mexico and Central America. So it's been introduced now to Madagascar. Orchids have specific pollinators, specific insect pollinators. That pollinator doesn't exist in Madagascar. So of that 70+% world supply of vanilla, every single flower is hand pollinated by someone walking along with a stick and moving pollen from one flower to another. Then we're going to move this along a little bit. Each vanilla bean is initialed so that they know, because they don't own property, but they own the beans. Be a lot of kiwi food. I want to wrap this up a little quickly here. We had one traumatic experience while we were there. It is the Malagasy would drop into the dirt wherever they were and not move. After it passed, they would get up, light their fires, and cook their dinners. I would always go to my tent. I was sick on this day, fever and chills. I couldn't stand being in the tent with it all zipped up. I unzipped the zipper a little bit and fell asleep with my face outside the tent and was bit in the dark by the centipede. It caused quite a ruckus in the village. Tina wouldn't translate. When I finally did get her to translate, she said through her tears, all they're saying is that you're going to die. So it was a bumpy night, but as evidenced by the fact that I'm here today, I did not die. Nonetheless, throughout this trip, my best buddy was Elian. He rode on top of my feet. He rode on my shoulders. We were Papa and son. And my kids know of Elian as a brother. The times to say goodbye came way too fast. My translator in white, the chief's wife, standing at the edge of the Ignobe River where I knew there weren't crocodiles because they finally let me go take a bath. Although it doesn't look like it there, it was hot. But saying goodbye was challenging. The little kids, the people who didn't like you and were afraid of you, who came and hugged you and kissed you and cried. We cried all evening long. I sat around the fire on the last night with Sunny and I there. 200 people in this village, one person at a time, brought us a gift. And by a gift, I mean a leaf, a stick, a clove, whatever it was, whatever they could bring, and gave us a gift, the poorest people to the richest people a gift. So many of our resources come to us in exactly that way. I thought I would get out of the village without having to say goodbye to Lilian. I was twisted about that. I didn't want to leave him behind. We packed up at 3 o'clock in the morning to avoid more goodbyes and walked out of the village, where we were met by Ilian, his dad, and his mom, with his bags packed, and they gave me their son. Like in the conduit program, we turned our back and walked away. It was all we could do, turn around and walk away. 1 month later, Cyclone Huda hit the northeastern part of Madagascar. And by the time Sunny and I got back there to help, these were our friends. When that happened, I reached out to all the conservation groups. It was what effectively ended my career at this lovely place that I have huge respect for. If I had to do something different, I reached out to every conservation group who had supported my work, and they said, we do animals, not people. And I didn't ever want to walk away again. Things in nature heal up remarkably fast. This is the Ignobe River a few years later. So it does get better. For me, it took a little more time, and it took some pretty significant changes in priorities. And it is through those changed priorities that we started ECOLIFE Conservation to form a seamless marriage between people and their environment, because we will not survive without a healthy environment. My good friend Carl, we know the issues of water and all of those things, and we believe still, with all the problems in front of us, there are great solutions. Last year when I talked about gorillas, we talked about stoves and human health and the use of resources for fires. Right now, ECOLIFE has just opened a sample farm, so we're doing 6,000 vegetables a month, which is not a huge commercial operation, but it's big enough for a farmer to look at it. The average head of lettuce in California, and by the way, California is second only to the country of China in the production of lettuce, but the average head of lettuce takes 9 to 12 gallons of water to grow. Everyone in the United States consumes about 300 gallons of California water in the food that they eat. We can grow that same head of lettuce with 1 gallon of water on 1/10 of the land. If you know farmers, have them come see us. This doesn't work for everything, but for leafy greens and vegetables, which are so important to our nation and to California, we can do it. Our farmers use 80% of our water, I think, and they account for about 2% of our GDP.
That's right.
And we will have to rectify that, and we have some of the tools that can help them. Thank you for letting me come and see you.